Alright, I'm back in Mudbox. I'm going to delete some of these, get back to our single layer, and I'll go ahead and just fill this with dial up something skin color-ish. Go down and flood the paint layer. So now we just have a single solid color. I could paint on this. Alright, so now I want to start using my masks and the different textures that I've developed in Photoshop. So I'm going to go in and create a new layer here, and this is going to be for my cloth, the shirt. So basically I'll go ahead and call this shirt. And I want to start with a bump map. And I want to import a layer. So I'm going to bring in my cloth texture. So we see a very bumpy cloth texture here. So we can go, first thing we can do is go in and dial this down. So we don't want this texture over the entire body. So I'm going to import another layer, our mask. So we're going to import that to the bump layer. Alright, so I imported the shirt mask, and I want to use this to mask shirt. Now I have a layer called shirt, but I actually don't need that, because this layer here is actually the texture. So I'm going to go in and drag the shirt mask on top of the cloth. Alright, so now this is a layer mask for the texture. We see the bump map here. I have the bump map dialed down to 17%. The mask is full on at 100%. And we just see the texture on the body where we want. Okay, now one reason for working this way, bringing in a whole layer of cloth and masking it, means that we can actually edit this. This is a black and white image, so if I go in and paint on this, just select some black, make the brush a little bit smaller, cut in here, so I'm just changing the collar a little bit, creating a little bit of a V-neck. Switch to white. So where I paint white, I'm adding to the shirt area. Alright, now when you have a layer mask, that controls where you paint as well. So for my cloth texture, if I wanted to have an edge that is not as bumpy, I could go ahead and paint on the cloth now, and this mask will protect certain areas. So I'm going to go in here and bring the strength down just a little bit, so that as I paint over the edge here, I'm just removing a little bit of the cloth texture. Okay, now I'm not going to continue with this, but this is just an idea that show you how you can control this a little bit. If I had buttons, I could bring the strength up here, make those solid. Go ahead and just put a couple buttons in here. and I'll make them big. And I don't know why you have buttons quite like this, but I'm just putting them in to get the idea across. Okay, so this is the shirt area. I've changed the color a little bit, created a little bit of a V-neck there. Maybe a Henley shirt, I guess. Now, I want to change the color of the shirt. So for that, I'm going to go to the diffuse layer, and I'm going to bring up a copy of this layer here. Now this is changed. I've painted on this, so if I loaded in a new one, it would be different. So I'm going to duplicate the selected layer and drag one of these up here under the paint layer. So this is going to be my skin color. I'm going to make a new diffuse layer. I'll call it shirt. Drag the layer mask up onto the shirt. Then with the shirt layer selected, I can make it any color I want. Let's go just with a blue color here. Flood the paint layer. Okay, so now I have this blue shirt. One of the things you should do is create color variation. So I'm going to create a faded version of this color. Lighten it up a good bit. And create some color variation where we have some fading from the sun. I could create a darker color to create stains, other natural color variation. I'm going to create an even lighter color here. Make my brush real small. Since I created buttons, I might as well give them a little bit different color. Okay, so I would normally continue this process, creating color variation, working on the strength of the bump map in different areas to get a different look. But this is basically the process of using textures as bump maps, creating a diffuse layer, which is your color. I'm going to go ahead and throw the pants on here. So for that, I'm going to import the pants as another texture for the bump map. Import layer. So I'm going to bring in the leather texture. Bring this into the bump map. So it's going over everything at the moment. There's no map on it. I'm going to go ahead and dial it down a bit. Now I'm going to put the mask on. Import layer, pants mask. Then I'm going to apply this layer to the leather as a mask. And now you see the leather texture just being applied down here. And that might still be kind of bumpy. Alright, so everything we see here is pretty shiny. And we have a different texture for the shirt, different texture for the pants, but we want to be able to control how shiny things are. We don't want shiny shirt, we do want shiny pants, we do want black leather. So, alright, so I want to put some color on the pants, black leather, so I'm going to create a new layer. In the diffuse channel, I should have named this. Okay, so I have a pants layer. I'm going to select a black color, flood that paint layer. That's going to cover everything because I don't have the mask on it. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to take the pants mask, duplicate it, and I'm going to drag that up onto the pants. Now I have black pants, and they're pretty shiny. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and control the specularity. And so for this I'm going to create a specular channel. Well, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to create a layer called leather, and this is going to go in the specular channel where I want to control the shininess. I'm going to go ahead and put a copy of my shirt mask. So I'm going to select that. Remember, this has been edited, so I don't want to reload this. I'm going to duplicate that. Copy one of these onto so let's say this says cloth. Here I have a mask. So I want to flood this with black to bring specularity down to 0. So I've got that selected, flood the paint layer, and now I have a shirt that is not shiny. So I rotate this around, you see the highlights on the shiny leather pants and none on the shirt. Okay, so this is the basic procedure that I'd repeat for all the different channels. I can go in and control, the bump map, the specular map, the diffuse map, until I have everything exactly the way I want it. I guess I'll do save as. So the skin is a little too shiny, unless he's oiled up for the beach or something. But that would just be repeating the same process we did with the shirt, maybe 25% specularity on the skin. Let's go ahead and take this into 3D Max. I'm going to send to 3ds Max. I don't have anything selected, so I'm sending everything. So when this is exported, it's going to be merging all the different layers into a single image for that channel. So there will be a single diffuse map, a single specular map, a single bump map. In Mudbox, we sent our scene to 3ds Max, and it opened up 3ds Max and imported the model and displays it here. So we see the figure, we see the materials, we don't see all the attributes showing up here, like in the perspective view we have the shiny cloth, whereas we have a specular map, and that's not being reflected here. So I'm going to go ahead and render this so we can see this. At this angle there should be a highlight on the pants here. I'm going to go up here. For screen recording I have a fairly small window, so I have to scroll over here, render frame window, and here we see a render that I did a little bit ago, and this is the current view that we have. Let me zoom in a little bit here. render again. So you see the lack of specularity. We do not have shiny cloth. The brush I used for the more faded areas of the cloth should have been a softer, larger brush so that this was nice and smooth. It actually shows up here in the 3D rendering more than I noticed it in Mudbox, so something to be aware of. Here we see the shiny black leather pants, and we painted in different diffuse map color and different bump map to create something like buttons, and around the edges of like some less bumpy trim on the shirt. So this is just very simple steps. It's not very worked. I just wanted to go through all the steps creating 3 different materials. We have skin, cloth, leather. The cloth map has the shirt layer mask. The leather texture has the pants layer mask. And that's what's determining where these things appear. Now, when Mudbox exported this, it would have collapsed all this down so that there's like one diffuse map, one bump map, one specular map. Let's take a look at that. One way we can look at that is if we go into the material editor. We'll do the compact one. I'm going to pick the material from our human body. Here it shows up. So here we see there's a diffuse map and a specular map. If we go down into maps, open that up, we can see what it generated. For the diffuse color, generated a map called channel default material diffuse.tiff. For specular color, default material specular.tiff. For the bump map, channel default material bump map.tiff. Okay, so these are the maps in Photoshop. This is the diffuse map, or the color. One could use any of the Photoshop tools to change this, clean it up, make more perfectly round buttons or whatever. This is the bump map. So the gray basically means no change, and then there are little darker and lighter areas in here. There is a bump on the pants, which is very subtle, hard to see. And this is the specular map. So this is the specularity of the skin and the leather pants. It's the same. It's fairly bright. The black areas are the shirt, where there's no specularity. It's a dull matte surface. Any of these maps could be further edited in Photoshop, or you could go back into Mudbox, and instead of working with all the different layers and layer masks, you could just work with these 3 materials to continue refining things.